Merry Christmas, everybody. I'm Tyler, and I'm here to let you know that Klaus is no perfect movie. And Klaus is about a lazy, spoiled postman played by Jason Schwartzman who is forced by his postmaster general of a father to work 1 year in Smeerensburg, this isolated island full of rowdy, disobedient students who love nothing more than to constantly fight with each other for no reason. But one day, Jesper, this postman, is approached by a reclusive toymaker named Klaus, played by J.K. Simmons, to deliver a present to this one kid that he believes is in need. And this one act of kindness hits every kid in town so hard to the point where they want to mail a letter to Klaus asking for a toy. And Jesper, who needs a select number of letters in order to move out of Smeerensburg, sees this as an opportunity. He approaches Klaus with the option of delivering more toys to these kids, which he reluctantly does, and it inspires everyone in this town, almost everyone anyways, to become upstanding citizens, except for the two unofficial leaders of Smeerensburg, these two rival families who want to put an end to Klaus's happiness and keep the hostility in this town going forever. And not gonna lie, I had an opportunity to check this out last year because this was a 2019 feature. They put it out in theater so that it would qualify for Best Animated Movie at the Oscars, and for whatever reason, I just didn't check it out, and I can't remember why. I think Klaus was what I was planning to be the only Christmas review that I put out last year, but I actually don't know why I didn't put any Christmas reviews out last year. I wasn't busy, I can safely say that, but I feel really disappointed in myself for not checking it out sooner, because this is a damn good animated movie, a much better animated movie than you would expect from Netflix. Now, they only distributed it. This was actually directed and produced by Sergio Pablos, a Spanish animator and writer who has worked in Hollywood for a long enough time to have a reputation. He was the original creator of Despicable Me, Smallfoot. He was a character designer and supervising animator for movies like Hunchback of Notre Dame, Tarzan, Treasure Planet. Dude has an extensive knowledge in animation, and after having seen Klaus, I really do hope that Netflix continues to distribute more of his films. I hope that he has a Studio Ghibli cartoon saloon like a following, because he absolutely deserves it. And the nicest thing I can say about the animation in this movie is that this was actually the hardest review out of all of these Christmas reviews for me to talk about the animation. I was struggling writing notes trying to figure out what I could highlight. And the reason for that being is that as I was watching Klaus, I spent less time analyzing the animation and more time just enjoying the movie as a whole. And it's not very often that you can say that, especially if you're a huge animation buff like I am. The drawing style, the hand-drawn animation in this movie has that rare quality of being obviously 2D, but it has so many distinct features that you could actually mistake it for a 3D computer animated movie, because the character designs and the backgrounds themselves are all very flat in terms of presentation and texture. The colors are very simple. It almost feels as if you're watching a storybook play out on screen. But the amount of detail that they go into making very small features, like adding wrinkles to certain characters, adding extra layers to a character's clothes to make them feel more three-dimensional and worn in, combined with just how extremely fast-paced and fluid the camera movements, expressions, and the characters themselves as they're moving during a lot of the sight gags, is so impressive that leads to the illusion. It leads to the suspension of disbelief, which is great because when you're watching an animated movie, you're supposed to suspend disbelief, and this movie pulls it off in spades. It has the not so subtle feature of when Jesper shows up to this town, everything is unbelievably bleak and monochromatic in terms of the color scheme. But once Klaus starts delivering more toys, obviously he figuratively and literally brings more color into this world and becomes a lot more breathtaking to look at. But something that I really noticed, and something that elevated the slapstick gags, was that during all the comedic montages when Jesper and Klaus have to deliver toys and they encounter some problems, the montages begin, have a middle, and end in the exact same shot. It almost feels as if we're watching comedic scenarios play out over a short amount of time. It's very cost effective in terms of drawing stuff because you can have the exact same features in the exact same shot, and you only have to change one or two things in order to make it feel different and make it feel all the more funnier and fresh. It was just unbelievably impressive. I could not believe that Netflix would want a 2D movie like this. I'm not sure that they entirely did, and I'll get more into that later on, but so, okay, the animation itself is absolutely fantastic. The story, in terms of characters and their arcs, are admittedly pretty predictable. We've seen stuff like this in a bunch of standard movies, let alone Christmas classics. I mean, as I was watching this, because this is obviously a Santa Claus origin story, there were some nods to Santa Claus coming to town that were pretty obvious, namely that the town authorities are trying to get rid of Santa Claus because they don't like the amount of joy that other people are watching while they're completely miserable. There's a side character that's a teacher and a love interest, kind of like Miss Jessica from Santa Claus is Coming to Town. It's not the exact same. In fact, that's the thing that's most impressive about it. As familiar as the character beats are, the story beats are, the voice acting and the presentation of the message is so impressive that you just don't really care. If I were to describe Jason Schwartzman as Jesper, the lead character, I would describe him as half Billy Madison, half Emperor Cusco, because he really is a spoiled brat being thrown into a really crappy situation, and he has to use his wits in order to survive. And Schwartzman does have very similar qualities to David Spade as Cusco, with this incredibly fast-paced, high-pitched line delivery that makes him out to be this charming con man. But all those features still present him as someone who can be an upstanding citizen, and someone you want to be an upstanding citizen, because with all of those features that I just mentioned, you know for a fact that he is smart and resourceful, and he can solve problems in a very short amount of time. We just want to see him take those skills and apply it to serving other people who are in need, and they pull that off almost flawlessly. There's one problem that I had with his arc where there has to be a liar reveal in the last 20 minutes of the movie, and of course everyone just turns on him in an instant. It's a cliche that I hated as a kid. I hate it now. In fact, why is this cliche still in kids movies? Like, if you put it in every kids movie, kids are going to guess it every time you throw it in there. It's a minor thing, honestly, because everything else about this movie is just so good. J.K. Simmons as Klaus himself, in regards to the minimal amount of dialogue that he has and the minimal, very unassuming facial expressions that they give Klaus to make him this strong, silent, gentle giant, does a really good job at portraying a man who has experienced a lot of pain in his life. But as opposed to constantly feuding like all the other citizens do, he just wants to spread kindness towards others and help them alleviate their own struggles in a way that can hopefully help him overcome his own. Rashida Jones as the teacher was surprisingly pretty unrecognizable. When I saw her name in the credits, I just sat there, I'm like, really? That's her? I couldn't believe it. I liked the fact that she is kind of a teacher just like Miss Jessica in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, but the difference being, because of how disobedient all the citizens are, she doesn't have any kids to teach up until Klaus starts delivering toys, and without spoiling anything in case you haven't guessed, more kids do show up. But what I loved about her was that because she spent a long time without teaching anybody, when more kids approach her and want to learn from her, her reaction was pretty shocking, but it was all the more hilarious. Norm Macdonald wasn't in it enough to make a huge lasting impression. He's in it a lot for the first 20 minutes, and then he kind of disappears here and there, but when he has to be the dry, sarcastic comic relief, the one who really lets Jesper know that he's in a shitty situation, he is absolutely hilarious. It's Norm Macdonald. His dry wit is never going to get old, in my opinion. But what really surprised me over who was funny was actually Joan Cusack and Will Sasso as these two family leaders who just love relishing in how much pain and misery this town is going through. And not only was their sense of humor extremely dark, it was dark in a way that kids can watch, but you sit there and question whether or not this is a kid's movie. They don't curse, they don't make sex jokes, there isn't any blood or guts, but there are some implications that there are. I mean, the town bell to notify everybody has a noose attached to it as the rope. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. It's not like life scarring or anything, and because of Pablos's past history working with Disney, I get the feeling that since he worked on some of the darker Disney movies during the Renaissance, I think that's where that balance kind of comes from. But what really surprised me too was that they take a simple motivation, but they make it funny, and they also serve the message of the movie, because their whole bit is that they're trying to get rid of Klaus and bring on the misery and suffering, but they're competing so much at trying to get rid of him that in the end they kind of actually help him out more times than they actually serve their own needs. And the message, I couldn't make this video without talking about the message. It is considerably more subtle than most adult movies, let alone most kid movies. It's something that for the past few years I have been really frustrated with, because I hate the fact that writers and audiences themselves seem to think that they need important, relevant messages spelled out to us like we're fucking idiots. And in light of everything that's going on right now, it's going to get less and less subtle over time, which is an absolute shame, because Pablos takes messages about not being able to, about how it's important to not judge people based on their appearances, not based on where they live or their past actions, but they do it in a way that's not preachy whatsoever. They don't insert monologues during the last 5 minutes to sum up everything that we've learned in case we weren't paying attention for the other 85 minutes. Instead, they just show Klaus and Jesper delivering toys to these kids, and we just watch all of these kids have a huge emotional impact and want to share their kindness towards others. And every kid in this movie, weirdly enough, is treated equally. Even this one little girl who speaks in a language that nobody else understands, but they still talk to her like they do. That was one of my favorite aspects, and it definitely helps that that kid was definitely very likable and cute, and even though you don't understand what she's saying, you really do feel like you know a lot about her. I just thank you, Pablos, for treating audiences with respect. It's more than I can say for other Hollywood productions, especially Hollywood productions that you were a part of, even though Despicable Me and Smallfoot do kind of have very similar messages about not judging people based on appearances, on past actions, and having such hope and optimism for redemption. The fact that he made his first film as a Christmas movie is almost perfect to do so. Now, there is one thing about this movie that I couldn't stand, and I don't think it was his fault, because this just seems like such a dickhead studio thing to do. The soundtrack for this movie does not mesh with this 19th century setting that they're going for. When there's a montage set to How You Like Me Now, or this one pop ballad that I don't know who sang it, I didn't look it up because it was overused so damn much. I just sat there listening to this music and I went, wow, Netflix really doesn't realize how good of a movie they have. I feel like it was just there either as commercialization or to supposedly keep people who weren't liking the movie from being bored, which it wasn't necessary. Everything moves at such a fast, fluid pace because of the animation, and the voiceover performances are that good that I can't really see anyone being bored by it. I'm not saying everyone's gonna like it, but I can't see what would be boring about this movie. And you know what? That's really all I can say. I'm surprised I've had this much to say in such a long amount of time, but if you do have Netflix, definitely check out Klaus. It does have familiar ingredients, but the voiceover performances, the direction, the animation, and the way it presents its message, it is just way too good to ignore, and for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Klaus a 4.5 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Klaus, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.